Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast episode. Adam here. Adam
Chris
Bush
here.
and Chris
I'm
Munch
Chris.
here.
Yep.
Here, Chris. And no Gary today.
No Gary.
No Gary. This is a special episode. We are actually recording this on Zoom because we are interviewing one of my favorite comedians out there.
So good.
Dustin Nickerson.
Dustin Nickerson. We couldn't trust Gary around Dustin.
We couldn't trust him.
We weren't sure. We were afraid of what he might say.
He would fanboy too much. No, he was invited and he said, guys, I have real work to do.
Yeah, he has work to do.
Yeah. So we're interviewing Dustin Nickerson today because if you've been listening to the podcast, you have heard me talk about it so much. But I'm opening for Dustin here in Tulsa at Bricktown Comedy Club on August 26th. And so we wanted to talk to Dustin about his life in comedy. Talk about
if you love clean comedy, like Dustin is the best. Like I love his style, his delivery, his just observation. He's just really, really, really solid comedian.
Yes,
and he's clean. It's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And so a little bit about Dustin because we kind of just jump into the episode. Into the interview. Dustin's been a comic for about 11 years. He started in San Diego and did the open mic scene, and some road work for the, first 6 or so years of his career. And then he started opening for some bigger names like John Crist and Tim Hawkins, and eventually sort of landed in the Taylor Tomlinson camp, Nate Bargatze, Bert Kreischer. And so that's, and then he headlines his own shows, and he just is killing it. He
wrote a book.
He wrote a book. He's got 2 specials under his belt. Trying to think of what, the guy, I heard Nate Bargatze talk about him one time, and he said he just grinds it out. He's a workhorse. Yeah. But what's also really cool, and kind of one of the ways I found him, is that he is a family man. He is a father of 3. He's been married to his high school sweetheart for, I want to say, over 20 years, something like that. And their podcast is awesome, which is called Don't Make Me Come Back There.
He's been on Corden twice. Is that right?
He's been on Corden twice. Yeah, he was on one of the last episodes. Yeah, he was on the last year that Corden was on, and then they had him come back one more time just before he left. And so, that's pretty special. So I'm a big fan. Dustin's been so kind to me and given me advice the couple of times that I've talked to him and met him, and it's so kind of him to let me open for him in Tulsa. And so, for that show, we want to pack it out. If you're in Tulsa or the Oklahoma City area, then come on out August 26th, Bricktown Comedy Club. It's a 4 p.m. show, so it's early, and it's 13 and up for people. So you can bring your teenagers if you like clean comedy, and it's super safe. Like you're not going to have to walk away teaching your kids about something that you didn't really want to do.
Yeah, have a conversation with your kids that you weren't planning on having. Yeah,
exactly. Having either one.
Whatever.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into our first ever interview on the podcast with.
Should we say the name at the same time?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll say comedian, and then we get. Yeah. No, we're not ready. You ready?
We're not ready. Okay.
There we go. So so let's get into our interview with comedian Dustin Nickerson. Here we go. Dustin, where are you?
I'm in San Francisco right now. I'm out here doing shows with Taylor and Tomlinson for listeners. We're doing the shows in Oakland and Fresno, and just stinking across because Oakland is there's just I love Oakland, but I don't choose where we stay, and the hotels seem to be a little nicer on this side of the bay. So it's all the preference of the headliner. So I'm in downtown San Francisco right now, which is great. I love it.
Yeah,
it's kind of an ideal situation for a comic, right? That the headliner would put you in a nice place.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go hang out and maybe pop onto the Late Show at the Punchline, which is like 0.2 miles from us tonight. So we're working.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a solid comedy weekend.
Well, we'll get into it. And let's see here. Okay, so but our podcast, Risk It for the Biscuit, just follows our comedy journey. Chris and I both worked at a church for 15, 20 years, and then middle age, both in our 40s, left to pursue comedy about the same time. You have some similarities in your story in that you worked at a church for a long time, which is actually kind of where I heard about you to begin with years ago. You worked at a rec center, and you became a comic in your 30s. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I started. I went to my first open mic when I was 27, so I didn't quit anything to pursue comedy for several years. I did them both simultaneously. And anyone who asks, I always recommend that as the route, right? Like, hold on to your day job as long as you can. I don't think a day job hinders your pursuit of stand-up comedy in any way whatsoever. I think that as long as you have a place that you can get on stage, then if anything, it helps it, because I don't think you want to tie your comedy to your income anytime early. You want to be free to try whatever you want to try and be whoever you want to be. And you'll start making compromises pretty early on to get money if you have. And I don't think that that's a good place to be creatively. So I held on to my job pretty long, and I was fortunate in that I had a good day job and that they were accommodating, but ultimately it was me who was accommodating, because I think, Adam, you've heard me talk about this before, but for the better part of 4 or 5 years, every Thursday or Friday, or at least a few Thursday, Fridays a month, I would open up the rec center at 4 a.m., work my shift, go get on a plane or drive somewhere to my weekend gig, do the shows for the weekend, sleep in the airport on Sunday night, get up Monday morning, fly home, go to work. Like, that was that. So there were compromises being made, but they weren't the job. The job knew I did comedy, but they hardly noticed in some regards. So, but yeah, to answer the first question, I was 27 when I did my first open mic, and I think I quit to go full time like 32, 33, something like that.
It's like 6 years of,
which is still pretty early. I was very fortunate. It was Tim Hawkins who made it possible for me. Like Tim, well, his brother at the time, Todd, called me, and who was his manager, business partner, and said, because I had done some dates with him, and they were very sporadic, like every few months or something like that. And he said, we want to offer you the max that we offer any comic, which was like 1 or 2 weekends a month, which supplemented that with my own work. I was like, this is it. I can do it. I can make the jump now.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, yes.
I owe Tim Hawkins a lot.
Yeah. People who listen to our podcast, most of them aren't comics. And so the comment 6 years is pretty early. I think that would be new information to them.
I think if you're a professional within 6-7 years, that's very early, and you should call yourself very, very fortunate. And if you aren't that, then you are either some phenom or you have a lot of money.
The 3 different careers there: church, and then the rec center, and comedy.
Yeah, the church and comedy didn't overlap. They're I started doing open mics almost simultaneously with there was I think I may have still been on staff at a church when I did my first open mic, but I was on my way out. I had already the rec center was my job and the career path I was going down at that point. So there wasn't really any overlap between. It was just selling rec center memberships and signing kids up for camp and soccer, and listening to seniors complain about the temperature of the water being too cold or too hot, depending on the day.
I fell into stand-up accidentally, so there wasn't really an initial conversation with my wife about I won a contest, and so that was kind of my introduction to it. But for you, what was that conversation with Mel, your wife, when you're I think I want to try stand-up?
Yeah, I mean, I think like she always knew I've been in love with stand-up since I was a kid.
Okay.
And she knew
Mhm.
that. Like it's always been my favorite thing, and she it was very gradual because when you go to your first open mic, it's not like I'm committing to a career in stand-up. That
Mm.
was very bizarre to me when people just go like, I'm pursuing stand-up as a career and they've never done it. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, what? I don't understand. Like it wasn't my experience, so I don't understand it. But I went to an open mic almost as like a bucket list kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
this is something I've always wanted to try. And then I did it, and it did kind of fall into step for me of going like, oh, this is what I was looking for. Because all I really knew from whether when I was preaching or I was originally started out as a journalist or thought I wanted to go that route. And then like I think like when I first crossed paths with your guy, Jim Weidman, I was running like the
Oh man.
like the conference speaker circuit. I had like a comedy blog, like
Okay. Yeah.
all I knew is that I had something to say. That's all I knew.
Mhm.
And then I found stand up and I was like, this is it. Because uh to me, stand up is kind of the only form of public speaking I respect
Mhm.
because it's the hardest by a
Mhm.
mile. Like
Mhm.
all the other forms are so easy in comparison.
Mhm.
Preaching, motivational speaking, business presentations, they're all so easy compared to stand up because stand up, you have to not just say what you're trying to say, but it also has to be funny.
Yeah.
And actually, even more so the latter. It has
Right.
to be funny.
Yeah.
Right.
And then also, if you get across what you want to say, great. But the crowd does not care what you
Yeah.
have to say.
Yes.
All they care is that it makes them laugh.
Yeah. I did a show at the Looney Bin with headliner from New York, and he came out, and this was early on, and I was just like, that work for you? And he goes, you actually have jokes. I was just like, I do. Didn't most people? And he's just like, a lot of people, they don't do jokes. They just do a lot of talking.
Yeah, yeah, and especially when you go into like a road city and a road room, like a Tulsa Looney Bin,
Yeah.
and they're like, "We got a local opener." You're like, "All right,
Yeah.
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
go." Like, I don't know what the Tulsa scene produces, and I'm sure you were a very pleasant surprise for him. And then you're like, "Oh, you're just like a normal human with jokes."
No, I
Great.
hope so. You mentioned Tim Hawkins, and then you used to open for John Christ. You're not a Christian comedian.
No, I mean those are always like such weird terms. I think part of the reason that Tim and John liked me and used me is because I didn't have church jokes. I mean, John told me that to my face once. Like he's like, we have no crossover in material. Like I don't.
Oh, okay.
There's no. It's a different show. It's very similar with Taylor and I too, in that you want an opener who is good, but also was like different than you. Like I wouldn't like as I'm like choosing if I'm going out and I was like, hey, who's someone that has my exact demographic, life
Yeah.
experience, point of view on the world? Like that's not gonna help me at all. Like I remember John joking about like he's like, I don't know that I'd ever have Andrew Stanley open for me because he's a homeschool pastor's kid. And I was like, yeah, I mean that
Oh,
is
yeah.
you. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I opened for John for a few years and was with him on tour when all his crap went down. And
We were.
yeah. That was after I worked for Mars Hill, and then John things happened, and I was like, "Is it me?" I feel like I'm the common denominator here. But but John was I've been very fortunate to have a lot of other comics. Like I don't get any industry love. Like I don't have an agent. I don't have a manager. I don't get picked to be on lists or get write-ups in Variety or anything. Like I don't get festivals. I don't get any of the things. However, I have been very fortunate in that I get a lot of love from comics and a lot of and I've been very fortunate that Tim, John, Nate Bargatze, and Taylor Tomlinson And even before that, when I was really early on, Don Friesen and Zoltan Cassis, like just good comics have like taken me on the road and really helps me a lot, you know.
Dustin, can you speak to why you've taken the route of not having like maybe more of a traditional, you know, representation and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, only because of them not asking. It's not my choice. Yeah. No, that's not entirely true. I have had agents. It has not worked out both times. Agency's really different. Agency's really unique in comedy in that I don't know if it's similar in acting, but like you don't actually need agents to get booked. Bargatze told me this, and I think he said Jesselnick told him this, that like 90% of what you get in comedy comes from other comics.
Amazing.
It's true. And my buddy Zoltan told me that too. He said like, one of the most important rules in this business is to be nice to everybody, because you never know who's going to get what.
Yeah.
And that is so true. Like, you know, you're like, oh my gosh, that guy's hosting the Late Show now. Well, it shouldn't have been awful to him.
Yeah.
But the I don't like, I'm booked every weekend till next February. I don't like, so when agents come to me, like they don't offer a lot to me right now.
Sure.
So I'm kind of at a point right now where a manager and agent, I would have to be convinced that they would do a lot for me.
Yeah.
And like the way that reps are in our industry in comedy is like they like you on a 1 to 10 scale. They like you when you're like a 1 or maybe like a 2 or a 3. It's not as far as talent goes, but as far as like how established you are, following jokes, dates, bookings, those kind of things. And then they like you when you're a 9 or a 10. They like whales. They can make a lot of money off of, right? And I'm in between that.
Yeah.
And I'm not like a 2 or 3, like, oh my gosh, William Morris Agency, you can get me booked. Like I can get myself booked. Whether opening for other comics or my own headlining dates. Like I'm like a grown-up. I know how to send emails and send my stuff. But I'm not attractive enough to like the bigger agents because I'm not selling enough tickets or making enough money in those markets. Someone would be like, let me get 10% of that, you know? And like, even if my special is doing pretty well, which it is, and I'm grateful for, it's not an amount of views and comments and money making so far that some rep is like, let me get a piece of that. One exception is I do have a literary agent. I do have like because you can self-publish a book, but nobody's going to buy that. The publishers still kind of own that world.
Interesting. Very cool.
So comedy, I sent you this question yesterday, Dustin. It's not pro-family. Like stand-up is not pro-family in the sense that like it's on the weekends, it's at night, open mics to get on stage for 5 minutes, it'll cost you hours.
Right.
So you are an anomaly. I mean, you have three children. Is that right? You have three kids?
Children, yeah.
Yeah, you've been married for a long time. I've heard you even say other comics have called you like husband guy or dad guy or whatever. Like,
yeah, when I wife guy, Dave Wade. Anytime I'm at the store, he always goes, Dustin Nickerson, wife guy. And they'll ironically start doing the Borat voice. Yeah, it's very funny.
So, yeah, well, just talk about that. How have you made that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a give and a take. You know, there's a reality to like the fact that like 9 to 5 jobs don't exist anymore. Those are gone. And when I worked in churches, I was gone on a very conventional off day. And if the kids had something going on Sunday, I was not there for that. And when I worked at rec centers, they had a lot of Saturday events. And I always say this, like when I travel, like, you know, I travel whenever I'm in the Delta Lounge, like the lounge is full always. There are traveling jobs. People travel for work. And this is one of the traveling jobs, which means you have to really go over the top to be as accommodating as you can, which is why I do things like this while I'm on the road. Like, so I try and I have like meeting after this and 2 more tomorrow. And I try and get as much done. I'll edit all my videos. I'll get all my content scheduled. I'll do all of my emails and stuff. I do that on planes. So I try and be just like a blank slate of nothing to do when I get home on Sunday this week for Mother's Day. And like for 4.5 days a week, you're father of the year. As far as my kids' teachers know, I'm the best dad ever because I drop them off at school 4 days a week. And there's not a lot of dads doing that. But then as far as like my daughter's volleyball coach knows, and all her events are on Saturday, I'm dead. As far as she knows, Gloria doesn't have a dad. So there is just a lot of like communication and ultimately like you have to have a spouse that it can work with, because Melissa is the perfect mix of an artist, an entrepreneurial, and just a highly capable individual that she can make it work. But I have people ask that a lot. Like, I'm not sure if it can make it work with like, our schedule in our life and pursue comedy. And then I just always ask like, well, what do you want then? Because if Melissa was like, this isn't working, then I would quit immediately. I didn't burn bridges at the rec center. I'll go back. That's not I can do local shows twice a month and scratch that itch for me. I didn't get into this to be a traveling road famous comedian. I got into this just because I thought I wanted to tell jokes and make people laugh, so I wouldn't be happy about it, but I would do it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Something that attracted me to your comedy pretty early on is that Melissa is a big part of your, the Dustin Nickerson business. And that's unique.
She's literally the CFO of our LLC. We were talking right before this, and I FaceTimed her. She's like, don't you have a call? And I was like, I don't want these like 2 guys to be the first people I talk to today. I want to ease into my day with a nice chat with my wife. And she's like, well, I got to run these books. And she was working on that and like the newsletter, and we do the podcast together and stuff. And I've talked about that a few times too, but I did have a comic that I was working with on the road, and he was going through a pretty big hardship in his marriage. And he told me that, he said, like, your instinct is going to be to make them less involved the more successful you get. And he goes, go against that instinct. Make them as involved as you can, because it needs to be a we. It can't be. Otherwise, it's easy to start thinking like, well, I'm making all these sacrifices for your job, for your career, for your dreams, for your ambitions. Yeah. And I think that's true. Now it really does feel like, wins for Dustin Nickerson comedy are like wins for both of us. It also makes it easier when you're saying things like, we just dumped a bunch of money into making a podcast studio that is not making money right now, but it's an investment that you go like, okay, I hope this works out. And that's a lot easier when you're making the decision together, as opposed to like, your podcast is losing money, this was a mistake. You're like, a little more leverage,
Yeah. That's so good. I so agree with that. And I think that's been kind of the heartbeat of what me and Adam have been doing is wanting to make this more of a family thing and not feeling like we have to do what we feel like we're gifted to do. And that means, well, the family's going to have to take the back seat. I mean, obviously there's like you just said, there's give and take, but yeah, I work a ton with my wife, Lisa. Adam, I know you write a lot with your wife, Di. So like, it's really encouraging to hear someone steps ahead of us go like, yeah, that's a really cool way to do it. And
is your wife back too?
No, she doesn't. She's actually pretty lower on like the artistic side. She's, more administrative kind of minded, but I find she's a great audience. She has good taste and can tell you when something's not great. And she's a great sounding board. So I'm usually the one kind of writing the jokes or the bits or whatever, but she's a great sounding board. So
yeah, there's a really good interview right now with James Corden went on Howard Stern, and he talked about why he left. People are trashing him like he left, like he got he like they canceled him or, and he's like, no, man, they offered him $50 million to stay. And he left. But it is a really good, I think it's an interview worth listening to. And he talked about like the family has been marching to the beat of my drum.
Yeah.
Here. Like that's it. And that's a dangerous place to be. And honestly, it's like, it's more vulnerable than I want to be. I don't want the whole family to be risking everything.
Right.
Just my behalf, like, because I don't believe in myself enough for that.
What have you, Dustin, have you made mistakes in that area that you
Never, not a one.
Not in 1,000.
Flawless, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it always comes down into to dates. It always comes down to like, because the one thing that I have is like, I do kind of have, not control, but like at my level, like booking has to go fast. Like if someone sends me an offer, this is a good example. So like I had to move a series of dates I had this summer in Columbus, Cincy, and Pittsburgh to December. And I had to move those because of some family stuff going on. And we, like the Improv, I'm doing a weekend at the Pittsburgh Improv, and they're like, hey, I think we can move you to this weekend, but I have this offer that's been out to a bigger act for that weekend. And we've been waiting like a month or two to hear back from that offer. That means that's a huge name. That's someone gigantic. That's like Andrew Schultz on his club schedule right now or something like that. I don't have that. Like if a booker emails me, I'm like, I email you back within the hour.
Yeah.
I'm not making you enough money to be an inconvenience to you. So a lot of time it just does come down into dates, and we had to get just incredibly detailed on our shared Google Calendar of just like every type appointment, anniversary thing that could be birthday, track event, wrestling thing. It is on the schedule. So I know when I'm looking at December 14th through 16th, I'm really looking on there and going, oh no, okay, wait a minute. No, Gloria has a choir performance that day. I can't do that. So it's usually in regards to scheduling that I've like, whoops, booked over that again.
well, let's start wrapping it up with talking about the show and where you're headed and some of those final details. So first, just as a kind of a recap, as a comedian, you predominantly open for Taylor Tomlinson when you're opening, Nate Bargatze some, and a few other pretty big headliners. And then you have your own headlining tour, which is part of the stop in Tulsa, which we'll talk about in a minute. I think, at least from my perspective, as being a stand-up, like I'd be like, that sounds great. If I could do what you're doing, that's kind of it. But where do you kind of see yourself going from here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good place to be for now, for sure. It's not like you definitely don't want to get pigeonholed as an opener and do that forever and just be, because there are comics in our industry that when you say that person's name, you go, oh, they're that person's opener. And you don't want that. You do have to kind of carve out through your own dates, but also your own projects, like I sometimes like, one of the reasons my last agency dropped me is they were like, oh, we don't want to represent openers. Like, you don't want to get pigeonholed as Taylor Tomlinson's opener. And I was like, hey, I don't think this is working, because if you think that's what the industry thinks of me, you are just so off. Like, I have 2 specials out. I have a book. I have several TV appearances. I have a headlining tour going constantly. Like I've got stuff. I'm working on my 3rd hour. Like this is it. I've been on these big podcasts as a guest myself. Like I'm not some, well, I was trying to think of where I'm not the second driver in Talladega Nights. What's his name? I forgot. Yeah. Shake and bake. Yeah, exactly. But I also do hear that sentiment, and because I do know that is a thing that exists. So, I mean, I don't have like an expiration date on these things. There's just, you want like a diversity of work, because, my goal when I started comedy once I started to get to the point where I like could set real goals, was like, my first is to do this professionally. Like, I want this to be my job. And then my second is to roll into a market, play their best club, like play the A club in that market, and then have 70 to 80% of the people in those crowds there to see me, like buy tickets. So that's always what I'm chipping it away now, which is like, I post in my brain. I post everywhere, every day on every platform. I keep writing and make more specials. I'll do 300 sets a year. I'll tour. I'll build up fans. I'll just that's kind of the steady trajectory that I'm on. And I'm not like, I was never going to be a like breakout artist. It was just never going to be the route for me, for when I started, for who I am, for what my brand is, for what my comedy is. It was never, I'm not going to be like viral sensation. That's just not, it's always going to be a slow build. And my career feels more and more like Andy and Shawshank, where you just go chip away each night. And then, you start to see, I remember talking to Nate about this special, Runs the Family, that came out. And I was like, I was like, hey, I hope it's like some big viral thing. And he's like, it probably won't be. He goes, it's just the reality. He goes, like, for guys like us, it's just like this. It's just a slower build. And fans, and then you'll go back to that market a year later, and you'll have new material, and they'll come back and they'll bring more fans. And ultimately, the way that you do build a big, strong, faithful fan base is through touring.
Okay.
That's so good. And I met Nate Bargatze the day after I filmed my Dry Bar, and he told me, he said, hey, it might do really well, and that'll be great, and it might not, and that's okay too. I called Nate the day my agent dropped me, and he was like, oh yeah, he's stupid, none of that means anything. And he goes, but this is good. He goes, now you have a chip on your shoulder. And he goes, you grew today. A very Nate thing to say. Before we wrap up with the show in Tulsa, this is more of a personal question. What do you wish new comics were asking you?
New comics were asking me. I don't know. I think when like I really feel for the new comic, in that I'm not going to answer that specifically. I'll just talk about how I like specifically feel for the new comic, because Taylor and I were like talking about this. Like, we started 11 years ago, and it was like, it wasn't pre-internet, obviously, but we weren't in like the boom that we're in right now. Like, I remember being a young comic and knowing the things that I didn't want to hear were usually the things that I needed to hear, which were like, hey, don't worry about a website. Don't worry about a headshot. Don't worry about getting clips. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Like, you need to just get on stage as much as you can and worry about crushing. Like, your only objective is to get as good as you can on stage. And I remember hearing that, and they're like, you don't need to worry about the road. Because when I first started, the road was like, that's it, I want to be at the road. And I don't know if that's even the same the mindset anymore. Like, it's even just in the 11 years that I've been, like, I feel for new comics, because I think what you see is the biggest comics right now are the ones like having like all these like viral clips and reels and TikToks. And I just don't think that can be the goal, or should be a goal, for a long time. And I don't know any comic. I know no comics who are happy about the material they released within their first 5 years of doing stand-up. And I actually know more of them, myself included, who have gone out of their way to try and get that stuff. Because there isn't, when you do start, there isn't an urgency to be seen. Like, you feel an urgency to be seen, to be successful, but like that is just not long-term success for you. And actually, it's probably long-term harm, because I think one of the worst things that can happen to you as a young comic is being seen too early. Like, that could be full-on demonstrative, potentially derailing to your career, because someone saw you not be good.
Yeah.
It's what they think now. like another comic. And that's like the danger of posting stuff on the internet. If like, you know, you can just like, I remember sending my stuff to like a booker, like an early clip that I thought was pretty good at the Ice House. And he responded back to me. He's like, I have 300 comics better than you. Like, ooh. Yeah. I was like, you didn't have to give a number.
Thanks for the specificity.
Yeah. So I would say like, but I'm very sympathetic to that idea where you go, but this is what it means to be a comic. Like everybody's posting. I'm supposed to post. I'm supposed to get reels out. I'm supposed to get clips. I'm supposed to film all my sets. I'm supposed to do topical stuff. So I get it. And I think that I was very desperate early on to be successful. So I get it. Like I understand where it comes from, but that would be my more generic advice of just like, don't, if you can not post, film, if you can just focus on things, adjust your writing and your performing for as long as you can. But I also understand that it's hard to get booked when you don't have those things.
Yeah, I was going to tell you. So my buddy Mason just bought our Looney Bin, and he's booking right now, and he is looking at Instagram followers.
Yeah, for openers too.
No, just for headliners.
For headliners, absolutely. But you should be thinking about headlining for 6-7 years in anyways, you know, like absolutely for headliners. When you are looking to start headlining clubs, all they care about is your following. Just look at the websites. Like that doesn't mean like if you look at the websites, when it used to be like seen on this, and this, and this, that doesn't even matter anymore. It's people with big online followings. And I get it because Mason, he's got to fill that room. Yeah. You know, he's got seats. He needs people to come in and buy bad food and listen to these jokes. Like he's got rent that's due. So absolutely as a headliner, but to the younger comic, like I would say hold off on that as long as you can.
That's awesome. So the reason you're on the podcast, you're coming to Tulsa. We have a new comedy club opening up in July, Bricktown Comedy Club, which they've got a bunch of them around, and you are doing August 26th.
Correct.
You're doing, it's a Saturday, it's 4 p.m. Yeah. It's a 13 and plus show. And I am doing it because I asked you if I could open for you.
Which is great. Yeah. And I said, yes, I was happy to have you.
Yeah. And which I'm stoked. And it's, I don't even know if we mentioned this, I guess, at the beginning, but you're a clean comic.
I am a clean comic, yes.
Yeah, we probably should have started with that. You're a clean comic, and so which is great. We can invite so many people, and younger kids, like teenagers, can come to the show. I don't know, why is the show at 4?
The show's at 4 because that was a date that routed with another date that I have in that area, and I pinged the booker, and he's like, "We can do an earlier show," and I was like, "Great." My crowd, they do not care how early the show is. It's the late shows that I have a hard time getting parents show up to. It's like, I can't be out that late. And I'm like, yeah, neither can I. You think I'm happy about this? Like, I don't, it's tough for me too. It is so funny when you look at the ticket counts. Like I'm in the Des Moines Funny Bone, like in 3 weeks, something like that. And it is like 75% full early shows. And like 8 people for the late shows. Wow. Oh gosh. Can we just send them to an early show and cancel the late shows? But you can't. And it's those late shows that'll make you good, but it doesn't mean I want to do them.
Yeah. So August 26th, Bricktown Comedy Club in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 13 and plus. I'm opening for you. Is there somebody else on the show too?
I think Steve Rogers is middling on those. Yeah.
Hey, that's great. I'm opening for Steve Rogers in July.
Oh yeah, perfect.
I've never met him, and I've wanted to for a long time.
Where are you opening for him in July?
Where at the Looney Bin in Tulsa.
Oh, nice. Nice. He's doing a week there. Great.
Yeah, end of July. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, he's good people.
That's great. Yeah, I've heard you talk about him. And they can go to DustinNickerson.com for tickets.
Yeah.
That's great. I had one more question. I meant to ask you this at the beginning and I forgot. I always think about this when you're talking about Taylor Tomlinson, and you mentioned it earlier. You and Taylor started at the same time in San Diego, correct? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So pretty awesome example of what you were talking about being nice to everybody.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we were like, and we weren't friends because she was like 18 and I was like a full adult male. So like, but we were just nice and friendly. And then we started working the road together around the same time. And
Yeah.
when you start working the road, I don't, again, comedy is so little about the road anymore and it's all about the internet. But like back in the day, like you, whoever you first started working the road with around the same time, you had kind of a kinship with because you would just text and call and be like, where you at? You know, and there's so much driving early on. There's so much driving when you first start, like, because you're doing these weird colleges and these clubs and these just venues that there's just like you land somewhere and then you drive somewhere, or you can't afford to fly there yet, or you got to fly into the cheaper airport and make the drive. There's a lot of driving early on, and you just you call you find who else is on the road with you. So we kind of became friends through that. And that being said, I mean, I wasn't when you saw Taylor Tomlinson the first time, you weren't be like, hey, I should be nice to her, you know, just in case something works out for her. She was like Thanos. She was inevitable. Like she was. My wife said the best thing, Mel said this about Taylor. She goes, everyone remembers the first time they saw Taylor Tomlinson. And I think that that's true. And it was especially true when she was young in the clubs. And you would be like, what? Who is, like, she's got community college bits because that's how old she is right now. Like she's a murderer, an absolute crusher. So
that's awesome. Okay, I want to plug a couple of your things. If you're listening to this podcast and you like my comedy, you like Chris, you're going to love Dustin. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can support him. First, come to the show. Let's pack it out in Tulsa. So Dustin will come back. And then Dustin's got a book. You got a book, which I have read. Actually, I listened to it on the road. How to Be Married to Melissa, and it's a very awesome book. It's a lot about your life, a lot about marriage, and then it's also very funny, and I very much enjoyed listening to it. Your podcast, which is Don't Make Me Come Back There, which is a funny podcast about family, which I listen to every week, and I love it. You can get to know Melissa. And and then your special, Runs in the Family, which I saw, and it's funny. Oh, actually, I saw it live. We were there.
You were there,
at the Addison Improv. So I'm a fan. If you could tell, I'm a fan of your comedy.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. So check out, and it's free. His special's free. It's on YouTube. You can go to Dustin Nickerson's page, and and you can join the comments of people who think he's a different comedian for some reason.
I know, that's very funny. Yeah. The ongoing. It's so hard to establish yourself in this business. Watch the whole thing and go, oh, I love Aaron Weber. You're like, what? Missed that by a mile. So
that's awesome. Well, Dustin, thanks for
thanks for having me.
All right, that's it. Chris, did you enjoy the interview? Oh, he's clap. You can't see him. If you're listening to this, he's slow.
I'm sorry. I was silently clap. Why did I feel like I had to silently clap?
No, it's an audio podcast. You can.
Yeah, right. Okay. I can clap. Yeah. So I was slowly clapping. Yeah. I was giving Dustin Nickerson a slow clap.
You did great, and he felt
it was great.
Yeah, it was great.
So many great thoughts. It really was meaningful to me to hear just kind of some of his family dynamic, the idea of doing this together. That's something, like with his wife, that's something that's really meant a lot to me. With my wife, Lisa, that's been very on the top of our mind of like, I don't want to just like, Chris wants to go live his dream. It's that we're doing this together. We're a team here. And so that was really cool to hear him talk about that. And also that everything that I'm doing in my career is not what I should be doing as far as being on social media and doing video.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, obviously it's like, you shouldn't quit your job. And I'm like, but it did.
But we did.
But
he's coming from a different perspective, like straight stand-up, all that kind of stuff, right. Where I'm not like a straight, I wouldn't even consider myself like a stand-up, really.
Also, I think he's coming from a perspective of like these guys who are like, I've been in comedy for 4 years and I'm gonna go out there and make it only in comedy.
Yeah. Whereas
I've been a writer and a freelancer this wouldn't work
Right, totally. Yeah, I've been performing for 20 years or whatever,
Right.
doing acting and characters and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like I just rolled out of bed one day and we're like, I'm going to make it as this.
Also, we have a backup plan. We can just go back into video production. Like, yeah. Which do we sound like we're just making excuses now?
I think it sounds like we're rationalizing it.
It does sound like that.
I did like what he said though about that having a job and doing comedy at the same time actually helps you because you're not just having to do things and compromise just to make money.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting insight and made me question a few things that I've done or whatever. It's like, oh, that's interesting. But that being said, I still would say I feel like I'm on the right track.
No,
I appreciate what he's saying. I'm not even disagreeing with him. I'm just saying I think for what I'm doing, I think it's a little different.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, especially with just here's the thing. I think a lot of comics, especially when they're first starting out, maybe they don't have a guiding voice with them that is saying, hey, don't forget to provide for the family.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Whereas, we've been married for so long to other people. And I mean, we just have a responsibility, and we, both of our wives were on board whenever we were like, we're going to step away.
Yeah.
And so, and there have been contingency plans. One thing that we didn't talk about in the episode, which I should say, by the way, that was a real treat for everybody who got to listen, because I emailed Dustin and I said, hey, could we just talk for 10 minutes on a podcast on the phone and just to promote the show? And then yesterday he was just like, what about we do it on Zoom and we can go longer than 10? And so I think we went like 40. So
that's awesome.
Really.
I think Dustin I think he's going to just continue to get bigger and bigger. And I think he's going to be, I just think he's hilarious. I think he's so good. And
yeah.
I honestly, like, personally, I'm not a huge fan of stand-up comedians very often. Like,
just them as people.
No, I just mean like stand-up comedy. I feel like if just any random stand-up comic, I normally don't think is very funny. Like, not like I'm like some comedy snob, but I don't know. It feels like it takes a certain level of ability for me to be interested in it. And I think the very first thing I ever saw Dustin do was like some video that he posted of him doing stand-up, and I just thought it was amazing and really clever and all that. So I don't know. I'm rambling here, but the point is, I think he's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. I think he's amazing.
I hope so. Yeah. And I hope
it's a treat. We got to hang out with him for a little bit.
It was awesome. It was so cool. And he told us in the interview, Steve Rogers is a comedian who I think I've seen on Conan or Colbert. I'm sorry, Fallon or Colbert, one of them. Is going to feature, which is great for so many reasons. Number one, I didn't know if I was doing, like, sometimes whenever you open for like when I opened for Kevin Nealon, it was like it was just me and Kevin Nealon, so I did 20, which is very odd. So you're kind of starting it, but also you got to go longer, and so, and I didn't know if it was like that kind of situation or if there was going to be a feature, which means I only have to do 10 minutes. Because I can crush 10 minutes. I can do 10 minutes. And the idea that I don't have to think about, like, okay, I gotta kill 25 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's so great. So, and Steve Rogers is a great comic, and my assumption is that he'll just be complete. I don't think he's clean all the time, but he'll be clean during the show. So DustinNickerson.com, go check it out, listen to his podcast, read his book, join his Patreon. I'm a big fan, and you should do all those things. Chris, anything else you want to?
I'm excited.
I'm excited. You're coming to the show?
I'll be in attendance. Yes.
Well, okay.
I'll be in the audience. Cheering you on, Adam. Just cheering you on.
This is slipping into Pastor Bobby. My boy did it. He's doing it.
You can do it.
I feel like if Pastor Bobby had a real church, if he was a real guy, I feel like he's the pastor that if I did his church and bombed, he still would have so good.
So good. You have a gift, sir. Adam,
Really?
you keep at it. Listen, you keep at it because you're good. That was good.
It didn't feel like it went very well.
Well, just because people weren't laughing doesn't mean you weren't funny.
Oh, okay. That does feel like the main indicator that I wasn't very
You
funny.
just keep doing. Listen, it was. I don't know. People were tired.
Yes, excuses. That is exactly what that person would do. Yeah.
It's Sunday night. People are always tired on Sunday night. Listen, I preach on Sunday nights. I know how hard it can be.
He's just gonna encourage you right into the ground.
Yeah. Just lead you right off a cliff.
Yeah.
It's not you.
They weren't ready for it.
It's beyond them.
Hey, you were too good.
You're too good.
Oh, it's so good. I'll leave you with this story. I did a little showcase at the Looney Bin last night and had a bit of a heckler.
Ooh,
Yeah, and I was explaining it to Di. It was a drunk lady, or tipsy, on the front row, and she just was asking me questions during the show, like during my set. Like I was like, "I have a daughter. How old is she?" And Di was like, "Oh, I thought a heckler was more like boo." And I think like maybe like the idea of a heckler, like that is true, like maybe in movies and stuff. But that's not the case. It's the person that messes up the rhythm of your joke.
Right. Yeah.
The person who we would maybe consider a heckler now.
Yeah.
and so I'm trying to do a really good job. I mean, I'm always trying to kill, but both of the owners were there. I had never met the second owner, and and we've got a show coming up. I want people, yeah. So anyway, I want to make a good impression. And so she's sitting right in front of me with her husband, and she says, just like this, she goes, How old is she? Like just like that cadence. And I just responded very quickly and go, "We're not taking questions." And then, which is, I mean, it's pretty rude. Like it's kind of a rude response from me. I mean, I was trying to make it funny, but like, I'm basically like, be quiet. I was looking at her, and I look over at her husband, and he looks like the biggest Italian mobster I have ever seen. And I internally, it was just like, oh no.
Yeah.
I mean, the look on his face was not good.
Oh my gosh.
So when I got off of stage, they actually asked, with like the manager went and asked her to be quiet. But when I found out that there was a chance they were going to be escorted out, I went to a different part of the building because I thought, this guy, I don't know what this guy's going to do, but he might punch me in the face. And if he punched me in the face, his fist was as big as my head. He would break my cheek. So maybe I'm going to read.
No, that you would have gotten a bit out of it though.
Yeah, but maybe.
Surely
I got something out of it. Yeah. It kind of was like on the outside, I was like, "We're not taking questions," and then internally, I was like, "Oh no." Yeah.
That's funny.
All right. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We hope you enjoyed this special episode. We will try to do it more if you did. If you did like it, let us know. You can comment. Follow me at Hey Adam Bush on Instagram and TikTok. You can follow Chris at Chris Munch Comedy on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube as well. Like our podcast, subscribe to our podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And please share it. That is the most helpful thing that you can do. And if you want to send us a question, we will read it on air, on radio air, riskitpod@gmail.com. And that's it.
That's it.
See you next time.